Welcome to Deep Dive Defense, military and aerospace enthusiasts. Over here we give rare insights you won't hear elsewhere. Today, we take a look at Operation Midnight Hammer, the United States attack on 3 of Iran's main nuclear facilities, involving the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. The scarce information available requires interpretation of various details to approach what likely happened that night. The claims surrounding Operation Midnight Hammer are very bold. Allegedly, a raid by 7 B-2 low-observable bombers managed to penetrate the Iranian integrated air defense system, destroyed the highly hardened sites at Isfahan, Natanz, and especially Fordo via direct overhead bombing with GBU-57/B massive ordnance penetrator bunker busters, and managed to exit Iranian airspace intact at subsonic speeds. One foundation of this claim rests upon another bold, not very credible declaration, namely, that Israel attained air superiority over Iran and largely destroyed its integrated air defense system. Above a link to our video, fact-checking that claim. Therefore, to understand what probably occurred during that night, we must first comprehend the information sphere generated by all involved sides and cross-check them against irrefutable hard facts. Before discussing how the strikes were conducted, we will look at the final result of this Iran-US exchange. Specifically, Iran's retaliatory strikes against the United States' main hub in the Middle East, namely the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. During that operation, Iran launched 14 short-range ballistic missiles. As counter, over 40 U.S. Patriot PAC-3 missile interceptors were launched in the largest Patriot salvo yet witnessed. The result was Iran's claim to have struck critical elements of the base, countered by U.S. President Trump's denial that nothing was hit except for a stray missile impacting open ground harmlessly. The significant observation here is that Iran made no effort to substantiate its claim of striking a high-value target, despite possessing the Qayyam optical imagery satellites and having access to Chinese commercial satellite imagery to secure an important, easy PR victory. Only several weeks after that Iranian counterstrike, media outlets linked to Israel published satellite imagery of the U.S. base. This imagery revealed the main secure communication link of the base to the United States homeland, a large satellite communication terminal, had indeed been hit and destroyed precisely in the middle of the base. A surgical strike against a critical high-value element of the base which the U.S. could not defend against. This evidence disproved the false statement of the U.S. president claiming that nothing was hit. Consequently, we observe one side generating disinformation and denying actual events, while the opposing side demonstrates no eagerness to display and verify its achievements against the opponent. Aware of this precedent within the information war characterizing this conflict, we can return to Operation Midnight Hammer and check the facts alongside the claims. When Israel attacked Iran's incomplete Arak reactor days prior to the U.S. strike, it published extensive strike footage and post-strike imagery, establishing unambiguous facts confirming the operation's success. This stood in stark contrast to the U.S. strike on Iran's nuclear sites. No strike imagery, for which the U.S. military is well known for, was released. However, this absence alone isn't a proof the strike didn't occur, given the United States' assassination of Iran's General Qasem Soleimani similarly lacked strike footage, likely to de-escalate. But the key question is whether such a large-scale operation, involving 7 B-2 stealth bombers and potentially fighter escorts, could be just a disinformation operation that never materialized in reality. Here it must be stated that the Iranian nuclear sites were certainly struck by munitions, and the raid involving the pilots and personnel involved is likely to have occurred. However, the specific claim of penetrating Iranian airspace and conducting overhead bombing using subsonic bombers could well be the disinformation element of this operation. Namely, the B-2 low observable bomber can also be equipped with the AGM-158 Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile and JASSM-ER Stealthy Land Attack Cruise Missiles. These missiles possess sufficient range to engage the targets attacked, launched from secure Iraqi airspace. Hence, in this hypothetical scenario, Operation Midnight Hammer was indeed conducted, but one critical detail was manipulated. The key point is that Iran's Fordo uranium enrichment plant cannot be destroyed by a subsonic, relatively low-payload cruise missile like the JASSM-ER, The only weapon with any chance of causing serious damage is the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator Bunker Buster, which can only be carried by the B-2. After the strike, it was claimed the GBU-57 was specifically designed to destroy the Fordo hard rock tunnel complex by striking its ventilation shafts, a classical weak point familiar to many from popular Hollywood movies. While it is more or less established that Iran's integrated air defense system was degraded to an ambush posture in the northwestern border regions targeted by Israeli strikes, it is highly questionable whether the integrated air defense system was degraded to a comparable state in its central heartland regions, where the nuclear sites are located. Such degradation would be necessary to permit the safe incursion of the subsonic B-2, requiring it to remain inside Iranian airspace for around an hour, while facing heightened alert status after the strikes. During this period, numerous systems capable of engaging the B-2 could have been activated once the alert reached relevant surface-to-air missile units. By any measure, the USAF Strategic Command would have had to accept substantial risks, given the potential presence of Iran's passive or low-emission surface-to-air missile systems positioned anywhere along the lengthy exit path from Iranian airspace. At this point, it must be noted that the B-2 bomber possesses unique characteristics among the world's stealth and low observable aircraft, primarily due to its flying wing shape and large size. This design necessitates radars operating at longer wavelengths for effective standoff detection. The B-2 Spirit design enters the so-called radar wave resonance regime much later than smaller stealth fighters such as the F-22 Raptor and F-35. Consequently, for long-distance detection, radars like Iran's static Ghadir stations, based on the Russian Resonance N, enable standoff detection. However, these radar stations were primary targets of the US and Israeli strikes since they are large, non-mobile targets which can be easily engaged. Iran does possess a mobile long-wave radar system operating in the required 50 MHz wave band, namely the Keyhan HF band radar. Yet, the bulk of Iran's mobile and survivable early warning radars exhibit reduced detection range against the B-2 due to their operation in the upper VFH frequency band. Adding to this, the US, as a global superpower, maintains an extensive high-end, space-based electronic intelligence satellite constellation. This space-based sensor network enables passive detection and triangulation of actively emitting radar sources. Therefore, the concept of a SEAD dead, suppression of enemy air defenses and destruction of enemy air defenses, campaign, creating a corridor to the nuclear sites and ensuring safe return, could be feasible, given this unique capabilities of the US. In this proposed scenario, all threat radar systems along the path to the nuclear sites would be detected, located, and struck by low-signature weapons, like the aforementioned JASSM-ER stealth cruise missile. Once radars sufficiently close to detect the B-2 are neutralized, the bomber would conduct the strikes and return safely. While this explanation might suffice for attacks on many nations globally, it is not convincing for Iran, which has systematically prepared its air defenses since the early 2000s specifically to counter US low observable air power. Mobile systems like the 3rd Khordad, Tabas, and Rod surface-to-air missile systems are unique SAMs tailored to deter precisely such raids by assets like the B-2. These so-called ambush SAM systems feature compact designs with minimal footprints, making their detection extremely difficult, a key survivability characteristic exemplified by Ukrainian Soviet-made Buk M1 systems against Russian air power. These systems operate under strict radio emission control, or even function completely passively, as in the case of the Rod SAM system. Consequently, they cannot be directly detected by the aforementioned space-based ELINT satellite constellation. The mere possibility of such a system being alerted after the strike and positioned by chance sufficiently close to the B-2's escape flight path could easily result in a shot down. This vulnerability arises because these systems employ infrared cameras for both detection and guidance of their about 100-kilometer range surface-to-air missiles. Once triggered by the alert post-strike, and given the about 30 minutes time window required for the B-2 to exit Iranian airspace, such systems could quickly start to scan the airspace to detect and neutralize the intruders. Interestingly, weeks after the strikes, reports emerged that the United States Central Command had proposed an extensive strike campaign targeting all of Iran's nuclear sites to halt the program, long-term. It was reported that US President Trump opted for the small strike package instead of the large one that would have been conducted over several weeks. However, precisely such a prolonged campaign would be necessary to establish any possibility of creating a truly safe corridor to the relevant sites and sufficiently reduce the risk posed by the presence of ambush SAM systems. Only this could securely enable a vulnerable subsonic asset like the B-2 stealth bomber to strike deep, hardened targets like the Fordow nuclear enrichment plant. The critical question hence remains: would the Iranian integrated air defense system truly be degraded to a state permitting 7 B-2 to safely conduct a mission like Operation Midnight Hammer? If so, several concentrated raids would have been adequate to destroy all sites associated with Iran's nuclear program, achievable within just 1 or 2 days given the immense size of the United States fleet. It certainly would not necessitate a campaign spanning several weeks, as reported, merely to strike the static industrial targets related to Iran's nuclear program. Yet, there exists another scenario, a political one, which may sound far-fetched but could potentially explain many of the observed events. Iran has consistently asserted that the Fordow enrichment plant is immune to any US strike, and could, to some extent, even endure nuclear strikes without being destroyed. This claim is amplified by the comparatively weak air defense system network protecting Fordow, especially when contrasted with, for example, the air defenses of the Natanz uranium enrichment plant. Natanz is more vulnerable due to lacking the hard rock hardening inherent to Fordow tunnels. Therefore, if one involved actor was certain about the invulnerability of its high-value object, and considering the numerous meetings between Iranian and United States diplomats concerning the nuclear deal prior to the strikes, it cannot be ruled out that Iran granted the US a permission to strike Fordow via backchannels during the conflict with Israel. This action would serve to demonstrate to all involved parties, including Israel, that no conventional military option exists to neutralize Fordow, and, by extension, Iran's secure nuclear enrichment capability and latent nuclear power status. It would prove that diplomacy and a negotiated deal represent the sole viable path to prevent Iran from becoming an openly declared nuclear power. In this speculative scenario, a safe corridor to Fordow and back was deliberately permitted by Iran's IADS command. Furthermore, a more or less symbolic strike on Isfahan and Natanz, using land attack cruise missiles and BGM-109 Tomahawk might also have been accepted, based on the understanding that these weapons lack the capability to cause meaningful damage to those hardened sites. Undoubtedly, this scenario is a highly speculative one. However, given the subsequent de-escalatory actions undertaken by both the United States and Iran, such as the United States not admitting that its main airbase in the Middle East, Al Udeid, and specifically its critical satellite communication system terminal was hit, and Iran refraining from publicizing this achievement, hints strongly at a hidden layer of political understandings. These understandings would come at a low physical cost to Iran's nuclear program in terms of actual damage inflicted, yet they would definitively remove the military option from the table during future negotiations concerning Iran's nuclear program. This would also serve as a demonstration to the United States ally, Israel, that every conceivable option, except for the nuclear option, had been exhausted by US President Trump in an effort to address Israeli concerns regarding Iran's latent nuclear capability. Whatever truly happened during the night of Operation Midnight Hammer will likely remain a closely guarded secret for the foreseeable future. What remains certain is that the official narrative spread by media outlets to the global public is unlikely to represent the actual truth of the events of that night. So that's all for today. If you liked it, give a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe. It really makes a difference in the YouTube algorithm and is a great support to the channel. The Real Enthusiast can become members and given access to exciting membership area material. Thanks for your support and motivation. See you next time.